All right, welcome to this presentation and discussion on OKRs, the secret to success. So let's talk about OKRs. We'll discuss a little bit about the problems with goal setting or the lack thereof, a little background on OKRs, why use them, how to use them, implementing OKRs, the nuts and bolts of it, and common mistakes that I've often seen and that we often see in using OKRs. So let's jump into it. First off, what are some problems that we often see with goal setting or the lack thereof? So first off, let me pose the question, what is the most important thing for you to achieve? Now, professionally, that might be a project that you want to complete or do. It may be something that you want to achieve in your professional career. Getting a large feature developed or a large product developed. Personally, it may be something like finally writing that novel or book that you've always wanted to do. Learning to play an instrument. It can be any number of things, but I want you to think for a second, what is the most important thing for you to achieve? Now, a lot of us are probably familiar with this matrix, the urgent versus the important. Unfortunately, we often get caught down here in the urgent but not important. And we often get caught spinning our wheels over the things that occupy our attention that are often very, very urgent, but don't drive us towards those longer term important things that we need to do. When the reality is that we need to be more focused on what are those urgent and important things, but also what are the important things that may not be as urgent, but will drive us towards those longer term goals and achievements that we want to get to. So for me, my lists often look something like this, and I have sticky notes all over my desk that look something like this. The constant urgent things that I need to get to that often drive my days forward, but don't necessarily add up to the important things that I ultimately want to achieve if I'm not careful and if I don't stay focused on what are the big things that I need to be driving towards. Which is why it's important for me to constantly take a step back and understand what are those most important things. For example, I want to and need to complete this OKR training video. And so to do that, there are a few things that I need to do. Create an outline, finish the slides, schedule time to do it, schedule the meeting. Those are all things that lead up to the ultimate goal of actually completing this. So by focusing on the important, I'm able to actually get done the main thing that I need to do. And I'm not constantly spinning my wheels over, the less important things that may be more urgent or may feel more urgent, but don't ultimately help me get to the goal that I want to achieve. So with that, we'll turn back to that question. What is your biggest issue? What are some of the things that you need to or want to achieve? And with that, let's go into a little bit of background on OKRs because history is fun. So many of us are probably familiar with a little bit of the history of OKRs. So at Intel, this kind of started many, many years ago. And there was this difficulty with the idea of MBOs, or management by objectives, and KPIs, or key performance indicators, and OKRs, objectives and key results. And all of them have differences and somewhat different purposes. And I've taken this from Measure What Matters. And it's a great book. If you haven't read it, I know many probably have. But it kind of differentiates between, what an MBO is and what an OKR is. An MBO, or management by objective, focused more on the what. An annual goal, kind of set by the company, top down, pushed down to employees, tied to compensation, not really stretching. Kpis had a similar problem. They were not necessarily stretching to push things further. Now, KPIs also have their place and still actually do have their place, but not necessarily in the same way that an OKR does. And so an OKR is really much more about what and how. It's not meant to be an annual thing that's pushed down, but is meant to be much more collaborative, bottoms up, team to team, aggressive, aspirational, transparent, much more frequently done. And that is kind of how these OKRs were born at Intel and then adopted across a number of different companies. For example, here's one of the early OKRs for an Intel Motorola chip that they were putting together. So demonstrate the superior performance for an Intel chip versus a Motorola chip. So demonstrate the superior performance compared to the Motorola 6800 as measured by deliver 5 benchmarks, develop a demo, develop sales training materials, and call 3 customers to prove the material works. So you have the objective. What are you trying to achieve? And the key results. How will you achieve your objective and how will you measure it? And that is kind of the key difference. So with a little bit of background on OKRs, why use them? That is an excellent question. So an OKR really is a framework. And I view them not necessarily as a rigid rule that we need to use, but much more of a way to think about how can we better set goals? How can we better manage our objectives? And we do that through really giving autonomy to each team to control what they're doing and how they're doing it. By giving purpose to everyone within a group or an organization to have a clear idea of our work and giving ownership. We own the results for what we do. This is the framework that OKRs allow us to have. It's not so much that I, as a leader, am giving you goals and giving you the way to achieve them, or that we as a team have specific things that we have to do in order to be successful. But we have the autonomy, the purpose, the ownership of what we're doing, and then how we're going to do it. And I'm determining that, or we as a team are determining that. And it's much more of a framework for how to do that. And I like that. There's no need to be rigid about things. It's much more of a way to think about it. So, for example, Mount Everest stands over 29,000 feet tall. And interestingly, there are over 20 different ways to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Now, if we think about it this way, we can have the goal of reaching the summit of Mount Everest, which is a really grand goal. It's a great goal. There are many, many different ways to reach the summit. Over 20 different ways that it's been done, and probably a few other ways that just haven't been done yet. So we can choose any of these different paths to get there. And we as a team, for example, if our goal as a company is to reach the summit of Mount Everest, we as a team can look at the different paths and decide which of these is going to work best for our purpose. And we can decide how we're going to do that. And then we own the results of that. Now, there are two most common paths that almost everybody takes to reach the summit of Mount Everest, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to take those paths. So that plays into the superpowers of OKRs. So first off, is it gives us the ability to focus on what we're doing and what we're not doing. So it allows us, OKRs allow us to decide what exactly it is that we're going to do and what we're not going to do. They help us align up and down the organization and across our different teams. They also help us track progress each week, each month, each quarter, and help us to stretch beyond our current capacity. Reaching the peak, the summit of Mount Everest, that is a big goal. But with OKRs, we can stretch beyond what we normally would do and push ourselves to that kind of new height. So let's take each of those in turn. Focus. So famously, and I love this example, when many of us know the story of Steve Jobs, he was forced out of Apple, the company that he founded. And eventually, as Apple floundered, he was brought back on as the CEO. And Apple had a number of different products across all sorts of different areas. If you haven't read the book, Steve Jobs, great book. And here is the example that it gave. So after Steve Jobs came back, it says here, after a few weeks, Jobs finally had enough of all of these different products. He said, "Stop," he shouted, at one big product strategy session. "This is crazy." He grabbed a magic marker, patted it to a whiteboard, and drew a horizontal and vertical line to make 4 squared chart. "Here's what we need," he continued. Atop the 2 columns, he wrote Consumer, Pro. He labeled the 2 rows Desktop and Portable. Their job, he said, was to make 4 great products, 1 in each quadrant. And that is how Steve Jobs refocused Apple and said innovation means saying no to 1,000 things. It really isn't about doing more. It's about focusing on the most important things and doing those things right. So that is one of the superpowers of OKRs, is really focusing on what we should be doing and saying no to all of the other things. OKRs also allow us to align on what we should be doing. That includes top-down alignment, so executives and leaders can help create the direction on where the company is going. It also allows input from individuals and teams in creating their OKRs and influencing the direction of the company from the bottom up, and also laterally influencing teams as we align our OKRs across different groups. So this process is a transparent process across all different teams, from top company executives, top down, bottom up, as teams and individuals set their OKRs, and across different groups. It's transparent. It helps everybody understand what everybody else is working on, and make sure that if we're setting a goal as a company, for example, to expand internationally, and that is a company goal, and yet nobody within teams or individuals is setting a goal that has anything to do with international expansion, we have a mismatch. And we can see that in our OKRs as we discuss and debate them, and understand that we either need to change our company objective or we need our teams and individuals to change some of their objectives. And that helps bring the alignment. OKRs also help us track. It's another one of the superpowers through weekly checks. So each week we check in and see what's been done, what needs to be done, what is the current status, and through our quarterly reviews to see have we completed our OKRs, what went well, what didn't go well, and what are we going to be focusing on for the next quarter. And finally, OKRs allow us to stretch. So there's different ways to think about stretching for OKRs. And different companies do this in different ways. So there's the idea of committed OKRs where we need to hit 100% of these and stretch OKRs. There's the idea that all of our OKRs stretch us in some way, and that, between, our 3 to 5 OKRs, we expect to hit somewhere between 70% of those. And that's fine. However we are doing our OKRs, we expect ourselves to stretch in some way. And that's the purpose of OKRs. It's not to keep the status quo. It's to help us stretch. So how to use OKRs? First off, we need to shift our mindset from the idea of creating features to creating objectives. So it's not about the features or the outputs or the things that we're creating. It's about the outcomes that we're creating. So we don't want to focus on, for example, a product team, that we created a new feature. That's not the point of the OKR. The point is that we created some sort of outcome. We increased retention by 10%. We increased new user signups by 25%. What are those outcomes? The features hopefully will play into that, but we have the objectives, and those are what we're focused on. So I like to typically think first off in what are my annual OKRs. So as I'm doing this as a product person, I like to think a little bit higher level. So from an annual perspective, what are some of the main things that I want to focus on during a year? And that might be increase user activation, improve our architecture and scalability, maybe launch new product lineups. So those might be some of the annual things that I'm focused on. And then as I bring that down into my quarterly OKRs, how do those tie up to the annual things that I'm focused on? So for example, I may be focused on increasing user activation this quarter and successfully launching one new product of the 2 that I want to do this year. So taking those high-level goals that I have for myself, those high-level objectives for the year, and bringing them down into quarterly chunks that I can take. And this can be for my specific product. This can be for my specific department, or this can be for our entire company. And, breaking down these pieces into parts that we can do each quarter. This matrix comes from Radical Focus, a great book that helps us think about how can we tackle each of these things weekly, quarterly, monthly. So the idea here being, as we look at each of our objectives each week, what are our priorities this week as a team? How are we feeling about our confidence? Over the next 4 weeks, what are things that we need to do? And what is our health status? Are things moving along well? Are there things that we're concerned about? And this is a great check-in to do each week. In the book, Christina actually suggests doing it at the beginning and end of each week. So Monday, What are our priorities for this week? And at the end of the week on Friday, how did things go? And then starting again on Monday, so that the OKR is constantly being thought about. It's not something that we just do and then put in the back of our mind until the next quarter. And this brings me back to a point that I made at the very beginning of the presentation. So KPIs versus OKRs. There's an important difference. And this is a matrix that I believe Boston Consulting Group has: market growth versus market share. So you have your dogs and your cash cows, which are not growing, and your question marks and your stars, which are growing. And there's a place for OKRs and there's a place for KPIs. Your OKRs are in your high growth areas. Anything that is growing rapidly or that you want to grow rapidly, that's a place for OKRs so that you can push them to grow even more. Things that aren't growing, things that you just want to maintain, that's a place for KPIs. KPIs are a great way to make sure that we are maintaining the health and status of things. Not necessarily that we're pushing them, but that we're making sure that things aren't falling through the cracks. It's a great place for a KPI. An OKR really is meant to push further. So that is how I think about KPIs and OKRs. It's also about becoming. So going back to the personal example, if we think about becoming a violin player, for example, so going to the personal rather than the professional, we can think about some of our objective of, I want to become a violin player. So this is different than, I want to learn to play a song on the violin. This is much more than that. Like it says here, it's about becoming something. It's not about doing something. And so in order to achieve that, I've put here as my key results, I'll practice 30 minutes for 5 days a week. I'll learn a musical piece within 6 months, and I'll play in 2 public performances by the end of the year. So this is a little bit longer term goal, longer term objective, but it has some of the pieces here that will get me there. So it has a system in place where I will be doing some of the parts, practicing each day, but also some of the milestones. I will learn something within 6 months, and I will do 2 other things, 2 performances by the end of the year. I could have broken this down into, more quarterly pieces if I wanted to as well. But this kind of shows on a personal level how I can take that OKR framework and apply it. Both putting in a system and achieving some milestones. And I think that's important. Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. This comes from Atomic Habits. And I think that is a really important point to make, both in our professional OKRs and in our personal ones, as we look at how we can use OKRs to achieve our objectives and achieve progress. Both making sure that we have those milestones and also have the systems in place to make sure that we're getting there. So with that, implementing. How do we go about implementing OKRs? First off, start where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. Just start where you are. I've been at a number of different companies, and every place that I've been has not used OKRs when we started. But I have started using OKRs in all of those places, whether it was personally, whether it was with my team, whether it was with my department. And in almost every case, by the end, the entire company was using OKRs in some way. So start where you are. whether that's personally, with your team, with your department. You don't need the entire company bought in to OKRs in order to start using them. You can change the way that you're thinking about goals, the way your team is thinking about goals, and start focusing on the outcomes that you want to achieve. And that's fun. So for example, personal OKRs. Rather than just thinking about your annual or your quarterly goals, you can start thinking about it in terms of OKRs. So, for example, I want to become an expert presenter and communicator. So, that may be a personal goal that I have this year. So I can start breaking that into my objective and my key results. My key results being I want to do that, or my objective, I want to become an expert presenter and communicator. And now my key results: complete 2 training programs, deliver quarterly high-profile presentations with focused feedback for improvement, and improve annual and quarterly ratings for my communication. I'm starting where I am, and I'm using my personal goals to use OKRs. We can also implement them with our teams. So rather than simply focusing on features, shift that to OKRs. Or add the focus to our weekly updates, to our quarterly planning. Now this can take time. So switching from features to OKRs may take weeks to quarters, depending on how your team or your company is. Adding OKRs to your weekly updates should only take 5 to 10 minutes, especially if your team is doing weekly stand-ups or daily stand-ups. Adding in a focus on OKRs each week shouldn't take that long. And then quarterly planning. Quarterly planning can take some time, especially as you start out. It may take several hours of planning your OKRs, depending on your team and your team size, and especially if you're new to the process. But it will be a very, very worthwhile thing as you start to shift your focus again from what are we creating, what features are we doing, what projects are we doing, to what outcomes are we driving for our users, for our business. And these are important shifts to make. Review and debate. This is such an important step. So as you create your OKRs, review them personally. If you're creating personal OKRs, talk to your manager, maybe talk to teammates if you feel comfortable. If you're creating OKRs for your team, whether that's a product team or another team, sit down, review them as a team, challenge them, discuss them, debate them, and then go back and revise them. And then once you're ready, take those OKRs to a bigger group. If you're in a product organization and you have multiple product teams, once everybody has done their OKRs, bring them together, discuss them and debate them, challenge them. Do you have good key results? Do you have good objectives? Are they going to overlap with things that other people have done? This review and debate is a really critical time because nobody can do good OKRs on their own the first time. It's important to discuss them and to challenge them and debate them and to have that open, transparent culture. You will be better for it as you do this. So, what are some common mistakes that we all make? And everybody makes these at some point. Some of the most common mistakes: too many OKRs, too many objectives, too many key results. I've gone into some of our OKR meetings with some people having 6 or 7 OKRs, and for some of their OKRs having as many as 10 key results. So, for some of their objectives, 10 or 11 key results. I've wondered going into those, do I have too many? As I've come in with 3, I went through and whittled mine down, chopping out several OKRs that I thought were good and important, because I wanted to focus. And ultimately, it was the right thing to do, focusing in on 3 OKRs, because if you have 7 or 8, you have too many. You can't focus on that many. So don't have too many. 3 to 5 is the rule of thumb. Beyond that, it becomes too diluted to focus on. And same with key results. If you have too many key results, you're measuring too many things and you can't focus on all of them. The next is tasks as key results. This is a common one, especially when it's difficult to come up with good key results. So say, for example, that your objective is to roll out a new phone system to the company. Very easy in this case to put tasks or milestones as key results. The first task is to select a vendor. The second is to test out the phone system. Third is to pull all of the old phones. Next, put in the new phone. Convert everybody for convert the trial group over, and so on. And all of a sudden, you just have a list of tasks as your key result. The problem with that is it doesn't address why are you doing it? Why should we care? You've just basically said, we're going to do it. Here's the list of things, of steps to get us there. Maybe that is a good project to do, but probably shouldn't be an OKR in that case. Unless you can turn it to say, we're going to do it, and here's the outcome that we want to do. We want to improve our efficiency by this much, and push yourself a little bit with it. Another common mistake is the lack of patience. Doing OKRs is going to take multiple quarters. I've never been in an organization or a group where it didn't take multiple quarters to get it right. They're difficult. They take a lot of time and attention, and you just need to understand that. So don't fail because of a lack of patience. Set and forget. This is another huge one. It's very easy to do OKRs, to put in a lot of work, and then to set them aside for the quarter and only revisit them at the end of the quarter. Don't set them and forget them. Revisit them weekly, bi-weekly, frequently enough that you can be constantly making progress and checking in. Another common mistake is copying a company. Yes, Intel has done OKRs. Google has done OKRs. Lots of companies have done them. Use them as a framework. Use them as a guide. But everybody can and should do them differently. There are certain things about OKRs that are very, very helpful. And certain companies do them in certain ways, but don't feel like you have to do them exactly like Google does or exactly like another company does, because you don't. So adopt your own flavor and find the way that works best for your company. And finally, not giving autonomy to teams or individuals. The whole purpose, or one of the main purposes of OKRs, is really to give autonomy to teams, to set the objectives as a company, as a department, and then allow your teams and your individuals to find the best ways to achieve those goals. So don't lose sight of that as you turn over that autonomy to your teams to help them and allow them to find the best ways to solve problems for your company, for your users. It's not a management by objective in disguise. You really are setting the high level vision, the high level goals, and then allowing the hopefully very smart people that you've hired to find the best ways to solve those problems. These aren't all the mistakes that you can make or will make, but these are some of the most common ones. So, some additional resources. There are many, many great articles out there about OKRs. I've listed a few here, and we'll list them in the notes as well. Some great podcasts as well, and of course, some books that I've referenced, which I will link to. And finally, about me. So you can find me on Twitter at Kyle Larry Evans. Also on Medium, where I post articles and updates at Kyle Larry Evans as well. And I also have a publication there called Product by Design, which is also the name of our podcast, Product by Design. And you can find out more at productbydesign.co. And I have a newsletter called Product Thinking. You can sign up productthinking.cc. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.